Tony Robbins once said, if you want to be successful, find someone that has achieved the results that you want to achieve and copy them, and you can too achieve the same results. Successful leaders don't get to where they are today by accident, but by studying their progress and their success, they leave behind clues that we can live and learn from and apply to our own careers so that we can achieve our goals and aspirations more effectively. Today, we're going to interview John Hughes. John has had a career over 60 years in the car industry. I'm sure there's going to be some fascinating things that we can learn from him today. Hi John, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Michael.
So you were born John Joseph Hughes on the 6th of December 1935.
It's very formal, yes. Am I about to be interrogated, am I? Yeah.
In Fremantle, and you went to Christian Brothers College?
Yes. Born in Beaconsfield, actually.
Beaconsfield,
but, yeah,
right.
But grew up most of my younger life in my teenage life in East Fremantle. Yeah,
right.
Went to Christian Brothers, yeah.
And your mother was a bus conductor, your father a bus driver?
Yep, in the very early stages. Yes, they were.
Yeah.
That's how they met, actually.
Yeah, right, okay.
Because you don't have bus conductresses anymore. They used to issue the tickets and take the money.
Yeah, right, okay. And you got two brothers?
Yes.
Yeah. So just a little bit about you. You started out working at a car dealership while you were studying accounting by correspondence?
Well, I started out, it's quite a long history, and it'll probably come out as you ask me more questions,
sure.
but my first involvement with the motor industry was as a clerk
right.
in a panel shop.
Okay.
In a company called Atwood Motors in Stirling Street, Perth.
Right.
How I got there is quite a story, and
yeah.
it will evolve.
And you started your business, your first business in your late 20s. You know, the story has it that you bought an old service station and you started repairing and fixing cars and selling them, and that's how it started?
Well, do you want to go way back?
Let's go way back.
I remember a lesson that happened to me in my very early years that I've never forgotten, and I'll share it with you and anyone else that's watching this. My mother had kept me in the convent at King Street, East Fremantle, probably a year or two too long. And by the time I got to Christian Brothers in Fremantle, which was a big, rough, tough school, all the boys had been together for a number of years and I was the odd one out. And it didn't help that in those days I used to stutter and stammer somewhat.
Right.
And I was a bit shy and a bit introspective. But I remember something that happened to me in that big, rough, tough school that I've never forgotten, and I've shared that with a number of people. A few weeks into that school, we're in a physics laboratory involving some powder in a liquid in a test tube. Benches down both sides, one along the back, 26 boys in the class. I happened to be up the back in the corner. The brother said, I want you to write out your answer, don't show your answer to anyone, and don't speak till I point to you. And if some of us can remember, that's the way they used to run schools, with discipline. 26 boys in the class, I'm up the back in the corner. So I write down .001. It was an arithmetical solution, had to work how much of the powder was left in the test tube. Right. It was called precipitation. I write down .001. A few months later, everybody got their answer written down. Yes, brother, don't speak till I point to you on .01. Points to the first boy on the bench, left-hand bench. Call out your answer, .01. Second boy, .01. Third boy, .01. Fourth boy, ducks of the class the previous year, .01, and I'm sweating blood down there. .01, .01, .01, .01, 25 times till it comes to the new boy in the corner, the last boy, me. He said, call out your answer. And Michael, for some unknown reason, as a shy, nervous, stuttering, introverted youth in that big, rough, tough school, I said, .001. They all turned around and jeered at me. The dummy, the new boy in the corner, I was right.
There you go.
Look, you stand up for yourself. You're not like a cork in the ocean that gets bobbed and weaved and ducked around with the wind and the tide. You're better to be stubborn and pig-headed than you are to be weak or vacillating. Stand up for yourself. I wonder, you know, in retrospect, how many of those 25 boys really had the right answer written down? But they buckle under the peer pressure.
Yeah, true.
No way. But if you've got tremendous self-confidence and self-belief, it comes out like perspiration on a hot day. Just there, it's there.
Yeah.
So, when I left school, I got my final year. That was called a leaving certificate then, it's TEE now. I got all my 8 subjects, not particularly high marks, but I was a hard worker. Even in those days at school, I had a good work ethic. And when I left school, I wanted to be a lawyer, but we couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to go to university. I had to go out and get a full-time job because we had no money. So I was a bit desperate, and I tried for a few accountancy jobs and didn't get them. And I rang up in desperation the education department. And they said to me, how many subjects did you get in your leaving? I said, 8 subjects. They said, you would have been a Monty to be a school teacher, but you're 4 days too late. The applications had closed. Whew, how lucky am I? Nothing wrong with being a school teacher, but given a choice, knowing now what I've got. So finally I got a job with the Department of External Territories in Canberra.
Right.
I'm 17 years and 2 months. I'd never been outside of Western Australia before. Got on a DC-3, nobody to meet me, didn't know where I was staying, didn't know where I was working. Sat down on the bench and I cried. If I'd had enough money, if my parents had had enough money, I'd have been on the next plane back. But we didn't. I was stuck.
You were there, yep.
But National Service was in. And in January, they didn't quite know where to send me because I'm a Western Australian working and living in Canberra. So they sent me to a place called Puckapunyal, which is just outside of Seymour in Victoria. And I got to tell you, Michael, I went in a boy and 3 months later I came out a man. Now I've got discipline that I apply to myself and I apply to my staff. And I got discipline from 2 sources, Christian Brothers and National Service. And if I had my way, National Service would be put in again. It was fantastic. I wasn't happy in Canberra. Halfway through the following year, I got on a plane and went back to Perth. Still looking for a job as an accountant. But I needed to get a job. And there wasn't much offering in the middle of the year, so I saw one day an advertisement in the paper, wanted clerk, Atwood Motors, Stirling Street, Perth. Oh. I'm a Fremantle boy, I didn't know where Stirling Street was. So I get off the bus, I go over the Horseshoe Bridge, I see this wonderful showroom with Vauxhall cars and Bedford trucks. Oh, I'm here for the job. And they said, son, it's not here, it's 200 yards down the road. It was a broken down old horse stable that had been converted into a panel shop. Right. And that's where I started as a clerk in the panel shop.
There you go.
Came the end of the year, I got a job as assistant accountant to a white goods firm, told Atwoods I was leaving. The sales manager came down and said, look, we think you've got some potential, how would you like to be a sales clerk? Now, the salesmen in those days wore 3-button suits. That was a big deal for me in those days. Never had a 3-button suit. Yeah. And they drove around in new Vauxhalls. I thought, wow. So I went down there as a sales clerk. Never got a 3-button seat and never got a Vauxhall suit, never got a Vauxhall. But I got the bug. I got the car bug. I don't know what I don't know where it's from. My father turned out to be a fitter and turner. Or maybe there's a bit of oil in my blood. I don't know that there is. I'm not a mechanic. I've never changed a tyre or a wheel in my life. Yeah. But I got obsessed with used cars, and I used to creep into the used car manager's office, and I'd sit in the Triumph Vanguards and the Ford Pilots and the Armstrong Siddeley Sapphires. Oh, how good's this? Right. So I kept saying to Atwoods, give me a job selling cars. And they didn't have an opening for me. Then I got offered a job down in Fremantle at a place called Howard Porter's. So I was a Fremantle boy. Right. And I sold Austins and that did pretty well. Then Atwoods expanded down into Fremantle and opened a used car operation called Motorama, and together with Mr. Young, who was the owner, and his son Peter and I, Pete was the manager, I was a salesperson. I started as a salesman at Atwoods of Fremantle, right opposite where the Catholic Church is. Right. That's how it started. We developed and grew from there. A company called Motorama got very big. We had 6 or 7 or 8 outlets, and I ran it under Peter's direction. Sure. Then I got married, 33, 34. Had no money. I borrowed the deposit on the house. But I used to wake up every morning, most mornings, with a knot in my gut. Had all the tests, nothing wrong with me, but the knot in my gut persisted. And then one day I saw advertised, by chance, a service station site, 196 Albany Highway, Victoria Park, just over the causeway, for auction. And I had no money, but I had this monkey on my back that I had to get off somehow. So I didn't sleep too well that night, and I rang them up the next morning, rang up the agent, and I said, I'll make an offer of 125,000, I think it was pounds, we were just dollars. We were just into dollars then. I think that was the figure. 5% deposit in 60 days, another 5% in another 60 days, full settlement 120 days after that. They couldn't possibly accept it. It was a fairy tale deal. So I slept pretty well that night. Wow, they rang me next morning and said, it's yours.
Wow.
So I had to walk up down St George's Terrace with my briefcase, and I borrowed 120% of what I needed. But the minute I'd made that decision, the minute I'd absolutely, totally overcommitted myself, way over my head, that knot in my gut went away.
Wow.
And that was my body telling me, John, you're not destined to work for other people.
Yeah.
Now I've got to tell you, your body is your best doctor if you listen to it. So that's how I started.